Hi, can I add my welcome to that of Chloe's? I'm the convener of the Business Committee of the General Council, which acts for the General Council in between its normally biannual meeting. So welcome, wherever you are, to the 313th meeting of the General Council. It's great to see so many people here from all over the place, not just Aberdeen. And for those in Aberdeen, of course, it's a welcome alternative to going to the pub, which they're no longer allowed to do because of the coronavirus. So what we're going to do is to run through the agenda, which I hope you have by you. We're due to finish at 5:30, but the last item on the agenda, or the last substantive item, is any other business. And if you want to raise a great many issues and there's interesting discussion going on, I don't think that we're guillotined at 5:30. I should explain that I chair the General Council meetings as convener of the Business Committee. The standing orders allow quite a number of different people to chair the Business Committee, the General Council meeting, but it's normally the Business Committee convener who does so. I've got 3 degrees from Aberdeen, the first in 1972. I'm very committed to the university, as are all members of the Business Committee, and I'm sure you are too. Now, the first item on the agenda, first substantive item on the agenda, is the minutes of our 312th statutory meeting held a lifetime ago on the 25th of January. And I'll go through these page by page, asking for any corrections. And if you've got a point that you want to make, do raise your hand, and Chloe will cue you in. The first page, any comments on the first page as to the accuracy of the first page of the minutes?
Just to say, we've got Jenny Gibson's got her hand raised. I'm not sure if you've got a question, Jenny.
Jenny? Perhaps Jenny has accidentally raised her hand.
Yeah.
As to the second page of the minutes, and the third and final page. I'll pause in case anybody has any comments on the accuracy of these pages, particularly Jenny. Okay, may I take these minutes as having been approved? We move then to matters arising, and I've tried to cover the matters arising in the next item on the agenda, which is my report on the work that's taken place since the last business General Council meeting. But if there's any other items, I'll give space for you to raise these after my report, which is quite brief. The Business Committee, which is, as I've explained, the existence of the General Council between meetings, the Business Committee has met 3 times since the last General Council meeting at the end of January, on the 5th of March, 4th of June, and the 9th of July. And on the 9th of July meeting, we were delighted to welcome the principal, George Boyne, to give us an update mainly on how the coronavirus had affected and was likely in future to affect the university. And we'll hear about that in a moment under the next item on the agenda. The activity of the Business Committee has been somewhat curtailed by the virus, although the 3 virtual meetings that we've had have all gone very well. But what we've done during that odd period is to focus on supporting the university at this problematic time. And I wrote on the 5th of June to the principal expressing the solidarity and support of the Business Committee for the university more generally. what we've done in particular in supporting the university during that period has been looking at ways of fundraising from alumni, and also using the contacts that the business committee members have personally. We've got over 20 members of the business committee, and we've all been around for a little while and have useful contacts to explore how these contacts can best be used for the benefit of the university at the moment. We've also continued action on a number of the items that have been on our agenda over the last 6 months, a year, particularly the engagement of members of the General Council. And with that in mind, it's absolutely great to see that there are almost 50 people taking part in this meeting, which is somewhat larger than the normal attendance that we would expect at a General Council meeting. So that's one strand of work that we've been pursuing during lockdown. The second is student recruitment and retention, and the third is the future of the building at Marshall College, which has a long-standing link with the university. These three items, however, have been somewhat impeded by the lockdown. Little progress has been made. We've also been considering how the General Council is best represented on the court of the university, which is the university's senior governing body, and that appears under item 8 on the agenda today. We're very much open to new topics of concern to members of the General Council, where the Business Committee can make an impact, and it would be interesting to hear of extra items under any other business at the end of this meeting. Last meeting, we heard from Dr. Charles Calder, who's writing the latest episode in the history of the General Council, taking us from 1960 to 2020. And I can report that Charles's work continues during lockdown, and arrangements are in hand for its eventual publication. I've greatly valued the opportunity to chair the Business Committee and this General Council meeting since last September, when I took over the convenership, and I've been very grateful for the support of the varied and interesting selection of members that we have on the Business Committee, and also from the staff of the university, particularly Nicole, from whom you've heard already, Steve Cannon, the University Secretary, who I'll be introducing in a moment, and George Boyne, the Principal. Now that concludes my report of what's happened of note since January. I'll leave a little space now for people to raise their hand, either to comment on the report that I've just given, although there'll be another opportunity under any other business, obviously, or to raise any matters arising from the minutes of the last meeting, which I didn't cover in my report just now. And it's nice to see that we've now exceeded the 50 mark in the attendance at the meeting. A good attendance, and we'll be coming back to the implications of that good attendance in item 6 of the agenda. But first, can I introduce Steve Cannon, who's the University Secretary, to talk a bit about the response that the university has made to the pandemic and the likely effect in the foreseeable future. Steve.
Thank you, convener. think that's me up and running now. Can people hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
that's fine.
That's fine, thank you. Yeah, I mean, my task is a short one, and it's to take you through really through what's been happening during the pandemic, and look forward to the future. I'll be fairly brief in providing a narrative, but I'm obviously happy to answer any questions that you might have, and I think we can leave plenty of time for questions. Just in terms of going back to March, when the problem first became apparent, we were quite perceptive and quite quick in acting in those early weeks. By the 13th of March, which was before any lockdowns, we'd already taken a decision to suspend face-to-face teaching, and we'd actually moved quite quickly to home working, again before the actual lockdown, and shutting down the university, whilst it was an enormously complex and stressful time, proved less demanding than bringing it back up will be. So we were able to close it down relatively successfully and relatively quickly, and that was reasonably straightforward given the circumstances. But by the end of what was the old term, we were able to see that we weren't going to be able to assess first and second year students in the way in which we would traditionally do. We'd moved to online assessment for third and fourth year students, and we'd cancelled the graduations for the summer, and we're already making plans to move to blended learning from the start of the autumn term, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. What was becoming increasingly apparent around that time was the financial challenge that would be associated with the pandemic. And members of the General Council will be aware that the university's had a financial turnaround in the last couple of years. We've moved from a period of deficits to recording surpluses or predicting surpluses for this financial year and for the financial years going forward. It was a fairly healthy position. But that financial turnaround was predicated on a growth of international students, and it's that growth that is now of concern. What we did once the scale of the pandemic became apparent was that we exercised financial prudence. We froze all staff recruitment, and we suspended capital expenditure. We halted expenditure on a number of major building projects that we were engaged in at that time. And we started to move then towards looking at the financial analysis. The Funding Council asked us to work on 3 scenarios. A reasonable, things worked out okay, we could return to normal sometime during 2021. Things didn't go quite as well as we'd hoped, and 2021 would be a major disruptive year. That was the middle scenario, and 21, 22 onwards, things really didn't turn out much better. And the sector and this university settled on the second scenario, significant disruption during 2021, but with the prospect of recovery thereafter. And just to put that into perspective for you, that means a deficit or a hit to the income of in the order of £39 million to the university. That's 16% of our income. And that's the scenario that we're working on at the moment. So we're identifying how we can bridge a financial shortfall of some 40 million. And at the moment, we're doing it by efficiency gains. We've cut back on senior staff salaries. There's no incremental growth in the system. Promotions have been pared back. But we're also drawing down on reserves, as indeed is the rest of the sector. The Scottish Government have basically said that they're not prepared to tolerate institutions having significant reserves of cash, and we should draw that cash down. That is okay in the short term, but it starts to present a problem for us after 2021, after the next financial year. So that's what we're working on. That's what we were working on in June. And then the Scottish Government, as you'll probably be aware, issued a roadmap for us to start bringing the university back up. And since June, we've been working on that roadmap. And that roadmap's in 4 phases, and we're currently in phase 3. And we're in a preparatory phase where we were allowing staff back onto campus in order to prepare for the next academic year. The labs were back up and running again. Just to put it in some sort of perspective, we've got something in the order of about 1,800 people who are back on campus, either working in labs or preparing for the year ahead. The campus looks a very different beast now to the one that you left. It's very different. But it was all due to come back up. And we put the start of the term back by 2 weeks, but we were expecting students to start coming back in mid-September. And what we would do, the intention was to introduce blended learning, so that we would teach on campus and online at the same time, and that we would expect students, when they were able and when they were willing, to come to campus, to start online, but to come to campus when they felt able to do so. So the blended learning would allow. We do 2 sorts of teaching in parallel, which as you will be aware, has put a considerable strain upon our staff. That was all going really quite well. The numbers were holding up quite well. The UK Scottish student numbers were strong. And the international numbers had held up quite well. And then yesterday we were hit with the second lockdown in Aberdeen, which really couldn't have come at a worse time for us, because it's the time when the results are coming out and students are making their final choices as to where they want to go. And given the publicity that Aberdeen's had over the last 48 hours, as I say, it couldn't come at quite a worse time. So we're busy trying to get our heads around what that might mean. Clearly there'll be a financial impact. We're only expecting it, well, at the moment the Scottish Government have said that these restrictions will last for 7 days, and that's manageable. If it goes much beyond 7 days, it starts to impact on our ability and capacity to be up and running in September, at a time when other institutions will be up and running. Finally, and just quickly, the government have not relaxed the 2-metre restriction for universities as they have in other areas of the economy. And again, 2-metre restriction causes quite significant problems in terms of timetabling and capacity. So we're not out of the woods by any means yet. It's not without its challenges. Finally, just to say that the Scottish Government, through the Scottish Funding Council, have commissioned a review of coherent provision and sustainability in further and higher education. And they've invited universities, actually anyone, to submit to this review. And they're asking questions along the lines of what do you think works well and should be retained? What should we stop doing or do differently? How can institutions best support Scotland's international competitiveness? What opportunities and threats are there post-pandemic? What forms of collaboration within tertiary education ecosystem can best enable a coherent and effective response to the COVID crisis? So the government's looking really at the coherence of its provision across the sector, and we await to see what that will bring. So briefly, Duncan, that's where we've got to. I'm happy to answer any questions you might.
Okay, many thanks, Steve. That's a very helpful, brief presentation. A number of people have their hands up. What do you want to do, Nicole? Do you want to suggest somebody?
Yeah, that's fine. I was going to say I've got a list in the order of people who were putting their hands up. So Maria, if you'd like to go first, you're welcome to turn on your microphone and your camera if you want to. That was Maria.
Sorry,
Okay,
I'm not hearing anything.
Yeah, we'll maybe come back to Maria. We'll go to the next one. I've also got Mark, who's got his hand raised. If you're able to turn your microphone on, ask your question. Okay, we'll try somebody else. How about Jenny Gibson? You've got your hand raised as well. Would you like to ask a question? Mark, I see you raised your hand again there. Would you like to ask your question?
You hear me?
Yes, that's fine.
Right. I am a disabled graduate, so I'm just wondering what the approach to blended learning will be for those who have either been shielding or in the highly vulnerable group.
Okay, good question, Mark. Thank you very much. Steve?
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I mean, it's clear we're not recommending that anyone who's shielding, or we weren't. We were following Scottish advice, government advice, and we wouldn't have expected. We wouldn't expect in the current circumstances for those who are shielding to come onto campus, and we would expect them to take advantage of the online learning. Our whole approach is that online learning should be of the same standing and standard as face-to-face delivery, and it's the mechanism rather than the content or the substance, if you like, of what we're trying to achieve. So the whole intention of blended learning, if it's to work, is that it's of the same value as face-to-face learning, and it's very important that it is. But we're learning as we go on this, and I'm not aware myself of the extent to which that's been specifically taken on board. But what I can do, Mark, is I can talk to Ruth Taylor, our Vice Principal responsible for teaching and learning, and I can give you a much more definitive answer. And there will be one. Believe me, there will be one. But I'm not in a position to give it. But the underpinning principle is that online blended learning should be is of the same standard and the same as face-to-face in-person learning.
Thanks very much, Steve. Is there anybody left on the list of people that want to speak, Nicole?
Yes, Jenny did raise her hand again, so I'll give you another chance, Jenny, if you're wanting to speak. Jenny Gibson. Maybe not. So we've got one more. We've got Peter Zentler Monroe. Doesn't seem like it. Peter, if you do change your mind, please let us know. I think we can move on to the next item, Duncan.
Okay, I see that David Watts, who's a member of staff of the university and a member of court, has said that he could say a little in response to Mark Cooper's question. David?
Thank you, Duncan. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
yes.
Fine.
Yeah.
Great. I could just give a little bit of additional detail to Steve as a chalk-face academic, if you like. So in answer to your question, Mark, we're being asked to make sure all our lectures are recorded and placed in the electronic learning environment, which is what we're using at the moment, Blackboard Collaborate. And they have a captioning facility in there so that we can add captions, and these can be verbatim for students with hearing disabilities. So lectures are covered that way. For small group tutorials, we are going to have a mixture of, if you like, in-person and online groups using Blackboard Collaborate, which is what we're using now. Obviously, labs and field trips are a trickier proposition and will be dealt with by individuals, but it's just to give a flavour of the steps that we're taking on the ground, so to speak.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. I see that Mark, the other Mark, Lindley Highfield, has pointed out that people need to press the microphone button at the foot of the screen in order to be heard, which may be the difficulty that we've had. And Peter Zentler Monroe, I think, is still wanting to speak. Peter,
Yes.
the floor is yours.
Thank you. I hadn't realized about pressing the microphone button. You're absolutely right. So when I was an undergraduate, there was a requirement to attend a particular proportion of lectures and tutorials in order to graduate. Is that still a requirement? And if so, how are you going to ensure that in a blended learning environment?
Steve, do you want to answer that?
I'm not sure I can, and I may look to David Watts to help me again, but I suspect the old class certificate, which is the system I came up in where attendance was partially compulsory, has gone by the wayside some time ago. But again, David, as a chalk-faced academic, may be in a better position to answer that than I.
David?
Yes, happy to say a couple of words on that. We know which students come to online classes, so we can take a register there just as we would in an actual classroom. So online attendance can be registered in a fairly straightforward and not at all intrusive manner. And you're quite right, Peter, that if students miss more than a proportion of their online classes, if they're unable to come to campus, the normal measures, which are kind of welfare and disciplinary driven, will kick into place. So if they miss a certain proportion of classes, they'll be contacted by administrative colleagues, and we go from there. So there is still, for individual courses, a proportion of classes that one must attend for most individual courses.
Thanks, David.
Okay, thanks again, David. Now, I would quite like, for the sake of keeping up to time, to move on to the next item on the agenda. Is that generally agreeable, or is there anyone with anything burning to ask Steve at the moment? Okay, the next item on the agenda, Steve, is still the floor show for.
Sorry, Duncan, we got a question there. Sorry, Duncan.
Okay.
Clive Kennedy's just asked in the chat, has government offered any money?
There were small amounts of relatively small amounts of capital money, researcher money available for COVID-related research very early in the process, a relatively small amount. There's been monies, again, a relatively small amount, I think 10 million in total, available to the sector for bringing the institutions back up onto capacity again. But what there hasn't been is any suggestion as to how we might fill that funding gap because of loss of income, the 39 million I referred to earlier. So there's been no promise of any funding. What we have had is indications of what next year's funding will be like much earlier than we might reasonably have expected in the cycle. So we know what we're getting for next year, but beyond that, no, we don't know. And frankly, the mood music is very little prospect of additional monies.
Okay, and we've actually also had one more person raise their hand, Steve. It was Alfred James. Alfred, do you want to ask your question? If you just remember to switch on the microphone at the bottom if you are trying to ask. Okay, I think we'll move on, Duncan. Thank you. Duncan, sorry, Duncan, are you there? We've potentially lost Duncan. It doesn't seem to be inactive, but what we'll do is just move on to the next agenda item, if that's okay, Steve. And I think it was the election update.
Yes, this is simply by way of reporting, and it's formal. 245 members of the business committee are due to retire this September, and those same 5 candidates have been nominated for the 7 vacancies that we have. So they're duly elected back onto the committee: Duncan McNiven, Ewan Mackenzie, Judith Taylor, Eric Crockett, and Jan McRobbie. And they'll have a 3-year term to September 2023. In addition, 2 remaining positions have been filled by co-option, and they're Lisa Henderson and Susan Strachan.
Good, thanks very much, Steve. I'm sorry that my internet connection has gone slightly flaky at times, but I hope you can hear me. Can you nod or shake your head, Steve?
Yeah, we can hear you, Duncan.
Okay, good. Thanks very much, Steve. The next item is Rob Donaldson, who's the Executive Director of Advancement, is going to talk about alumni development generally and the unfortunate Blackbaud data breach, which has affected some alumni information. On you go, Rob.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Duncan, and hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be able to provide you with a bit of an update on the alumni and development activities at the university, as well as this unfortunate data breach. So I'll start with the good news first. The office, like the rest of the university, is adapting well to the new realities of COVID. All of our staff are working at home. Our fundraising activities are continuing. They're somewhat reduced, obviously, because of COVID, but at the end of our fiscal year, we had approximately £7 million in gifts received, and that was led mainly by several major bequests from grateful alumni. That also included a $1 million US legacy from the Norma and Alan Young estate. Our staff are keeping in regular touch with our donors through email and phone calls and various reports and updates. We've been holding briefings with key donors and alumni, with our principal and with some of our heads of school. We've been using the Teams function to have these video meetings with various friends and alumni of the university. We've also been spending a good deal of time during the COVID period to work to identify prospective donors. A lot of good research is being done. We're refining our list and augmenting it with helpful information. And this is an area where the Business Council might be able to assist. You mentioned at the beginning, Duncan, that there are various ways that the Business Council can assist, and helping us identify prospective donors to the university is certainly one way to do that. During the COVID period, we've initiated a special COVID-19 525 bursary appeal. This is to raise money for students who've encountered hardship specifically as a result of the COVID pandemic. We've raised nearly £200,000 so far from 634 donors, and that's exceeded our goal of 150,000. But we know that the need is significant. We've had many students come forward who are in financial need. In order for them to continue their studies online, many of them need laptops or they need access to the internet. And so these funds will be able to enable students to work remotely. It will also help students who have encountered financial hardship because they've lost their student jobs or they weren't able to find summer jobs. And just to give you an indication of the demand for these funds, we've had 225 applications to date from students in need. And again, this is another area where the Business Council can assist if they're interested in making a personal contribution to that fund that would be well received. The final item on the update I'd like to share is we've been very active over the COVID period in the call for nominations for our 525 Alumni of Achievement project. We've received over 1,000 nominations. We've hired a researcher to go through each of the nominations and verify the information, add to the information, and also make sure that there's no unsavory characteristics in the individual's past. That's particularly true these days. And then very soon we'll be calling for nomination, or sorry, not nominations, but we'll be calling for volunteers to serve as reviewers of the various nominations we've received. We're going to need over 100 reviewers, take about 25 nominations each, read through them and score them. And again, if any members of the Business Council would be interested in assisting, they can notify me and we'd be more than happy to get them involved. And now I'd like to share some of the details about a recent security breach within our alumni and donor database. I also want to outline some of the action steps we've taken to ascertain the scope and the severity of the breach, and then the steps we've taken to address the matter, not only with our vendor, but also the steps we've taken to notify those who've been affected by the breach. So just very briefly, many of you might know that our alumni and donor database is known as Razor's Edge. It's a product created by a company called Blackbaud, and they hold all of our data on their servers. Recently, there was a cyber attack on the backup server at the company Blackbaud, which affected our data. We've been told that the breach has been quite widespread in the Asia Pacific region, as well as the United States and the UK, and it's been particularly damaging among the higher education institutions within the UK. And unfortunately, the University of Aberdeen was impacted. The breach took place in May, but Blackbaud didn't notify us until July the 16th. We're not pleased at all with that. That delay, though, they tell us, was due to the fact that they were involving the FBI, this is an American company, and a third-party forensic service to look into the matter and to try to come up with a resolution.
Oh, Duncan, are you there?
Yes, the connection's a little flaky.
Okay. I think, Rob, are we ready to open for questions?
Good.
Yeah. Okay. I've got a hand raised from Nigel Lindsay. Nigel, if you want to turn on your microphone and ask Rob your question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Nigel, we can hear you.
That's great, thanks. First of all, thanks to the alumni team for everything that they've been doing during lockdown. It's been great to have the events and so on online. On the Blackbaud security breach, I'm troubled by this because it's not just Aberdeen, is it? There have been reports that Heriot-Watt University has been hit, Selwyn College, Cambridge, and this morning I see a report that the Migraine Trust has been hit. So it's fairly widespread, and I wonder what confidence we can have in the company to keep our data safe.
Thank you for that, Nigel. I've just seen that unfortunately Rob seems to have lost his connection just now. Hopefully he'll be able to rejoin us in just a minute. So I think we might have to table his questions for just a moment and perhaps move on to the next agenda item. Duncan, what do you think?
Okay, yes, that would be fine. We can store Nigel's question. I think, did Alfred James have a question as well?
No, he doesn't have his hand
Maybe
raised at the moment. We have one from Kathleen as well, but I think we're best waiting until Rob's back to answer those.
Okay. In that case, let's move on to the next item, which is proposed changes to standing orders. And on this, Eric Crockert, who's a former convener of the Business Committee and the world's living expert on the standing orders of the General Council, is going to introduce the paper. Eric?
Hello. Hello, Duncan. Are you getting me?
Yes, hello, that's fine.
Yes, that's fine. Just briefly, because we've got the detail in the agenda papers, First of all, I'll take the proposed change to Standing Order 29. This is the one which at the moment requires at least 6 months' notice of intention to propose a change to the standing orders. The effect of the change by removing it to no more than 3 months will still be that it will maintain the status quo, which will be that from the time that there's a proposed change to the time that any change can take place, and there's a vote of the General Council on it, will remain approximately 1 year. If we didn't do that, then the danger was that it would sometimes be up to nearly 18 months before we could effect any change in the standing order. So that's the reason for that one. Standing Order 19, the proposed change, which you can see there in the text, and you can see the red text which is added and the strike through for the existing text. That's a provisional change. It may need to be further amended when we know the outcome of the university governance review. So this is basically a placeholder proposed motion at the moment, and it may need to be proposed and then further amended in the light of events.
Okay, thanks very much, Eric. Is there anyone who shares Eric's enormous enthusiasm for delving into the standing orders of the General Council who wants to ask any questions at this stage?
Okay,
many thanks, Eric. We will hear about this again at
sorry,
the,
Duncan, we do have somebody. We've got Florence has raised a hand. So Florence, if you want to ask a question, please go ahead.
How does this affect the standing orders, the ones that we have regularly every year, every month? Does it affect the standing orders that we put in every month?
The standing orders are basically the framework, if you like, under which the General Council operates. And these are changes which are being proposed in order to, as I say, in the case of Standing Order 29, maintain the status quo, allowing people to propose changes to the standing orders. And the change that's proposed to Standing Order 19 is in order to regularise the position regarding the people who were General Council assessors and then became independent assessors with a right to sit on the business committee. But as you can see in the paper, the two of those former General Council assessors are due to come to the end of their term of office next year, and so we will need to effect a change in the Standing Order 19 in order to continue to try and maintain a link between independent members on the court and the business committee of the General Council.
Thank you.
Is that an adequate answer to your question?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much. I have for the moment switched off my camera to use less bandwidth, so that's why you can no longer see me, but I still exist and my microphone seems to be working fine. Is Rob Donaldson back, Nicole?
He is not back at the moment. One of Chloe, my colleague, she's just dropped him an email to see if there's perhaps anything that she could fill in to answer for him. So we'll have to come back to that again. If that's okay.
I can maybe,
right,
Steve, I can maybe answer the question, Nigel's question.
Well, it was, yeah. Did you hear Nigel's question?
Yeah. I mean,
happy to answer.
I mean, it is. I mean, Nigel's right. It is a source of great concern. I mean, Razor's Edge is pretty much an industry standard as far as this sort of database is concerned, and it will affect a lot of universities, in fact, a lot of charities. So I think there is a huge question mark over our confidence in the company, and of course we need to think about our response in the context of how others are responding as well. So we're in contact, or Rob's in contact with his counterparts at other universities that have been impacted by this, and we'll move. I suspect when we move, we'll move in concert with them. We're also looking really at the way in which we hold data within the university, and again, I think given the the significance of this loss. I think we're looking hard at the way in which we hold data and how we hold that data.
Okay. Is it worth Kathleen Preston asking her question just now, in the hopes that Steve can similarly answer it? Kathleen, what do you think?
I think that Steve has partly addressed my question. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Kathleen.
I would agree that the university has to look into its whole data holding and data sharing arrangements. I was very disturbed to get the communication from the university. I think it's damaging to our reputation. I know we are with other people, but that isn't really an answer. I think also everyone should be looking at their remedies against blackboard. There are contractual issues with this. Very disturbing.
Yes, I agree, Kathleen. I think we're looking at it very seriously. I was just reporting to SMT. We had a very similar incident when I was in Hong Kong, and we did a big audit of how we were handling data at Hong Kong U, and the result of that was a 3-year exercise in cleansing that data and introducing new data management, but also training for staff as well. It was significant. It was a significant exercise.
Okay, thanks very much, Steve, for stepping into the breach. A regrettable incident, and one that calls into question one of the kind of calls to action, which I want the business committee to be making. Referring to what Rob Donaldson was saying earlier, and rallying round financially to support the university at the moment, particularly. But perhaps we'll hear more of that in the network of alumni with whom Rob and Nicole communicate. Then the next item is a brief item. Merely to say that we're heartened by the number of people and the variety of people who've attended this meeting, the first virtual meeting that has ever been held of the General Council. The General Council's first meeting having been held on the 10th of October 1860. This is the first virtual one, and we'll be looking very carefully at whether future meetings can be done perhaps on a blended basis, allowing both the advantage of getting round a table and physically seeing each other and meeting each other and understanding more easily where we're all coming from than we can do on the internet, and at the same time getting the advantage of the variety and the number of people that a virtual meeting can unlock. So I'd be very happy to take any questions or observations on that, and I'm conscious that my own internet connection hasn't been faultless, which is a problem with all these types of meetings. But the bottom line is that it would be good to see more of this kind of thing. Nicole, does anyone? Yes.
Sorry, I'm just going to say, Chloe's actually going to just send out quickly a little poll to everyone that's joined. It'll pop up on their screen, and they can choose if they would like, if they think an in-person meeting's better, a virtual meeting's better, or both, and then we can have a look at those responses.
That's excellent for the people that are here and the people that are signed up but haven't turned up on the day. It doesn't catch the folk that don't have a good internet connection or are technophobic. But that's a useful bit of data. Thanks, Nicole. Any comments?
Yeah, we've got a hand raised from Mark Lindley Highfield.
Mark, remember to press your microphone switch.
Hi, yes, I'm doing that. And good evening or good afternoon to everybody who's here tonight. Just to ask a question related to this, but from the perspective of the business committee, I was interested to hear that you've held 3 successful virtual meetings under the COVID-19 situation this year. I was just wondering if you are considering taking a blended approach to future business committee meetings as well as the functional organ of the General Council, and if that's something that could be considered for the future to increase participation.
Absolutely. We've done actually one trial before the COVID problem of allowing people to join the business committee meeting remotely, not by video, but by audio. And that worked fairly well. And I think that the experiences that we've had over the last 3 meetings encourage us to repeat that, particularly if, as I suspect will be the case, the technology evolves and the university's use of the technology evolves to make it easier to participate in video. One of the advantages of the business committee is the team spirit that we've developed, and I think it's more difficult to develop as distinct from maintain that team spirit when we're not meeting physically. But we could overcome that, I think, by using the technique of an occasional, perhaps biennial, away day, which would allow us to, as it were, bond and understand each other's points of view. And then in between that time, we could meet more virtually.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Thanks, Mark, and thanks for your help with the microphone. Is there anyone else that wants to comment on that?
Yeah, we've got a hand raised from Doris as well. So if you just remember to switch your microphone on, Doris.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, yes, we can.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Yes, that's
Hello.
good.
Can you hear me?
No.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. I am actually
I
a new graduate. From the information I'm getting, it appears that many people here graduated very many years ago. I got my PhD at the Uni Aberdeen in 2015. 2015 November was when I did my graduation. So I'm joining from Nigeria here.
Wonderful.
Oh, yeah. So I wanted to know,
sorry.
I want to find out something.
Hey,
are you hearing me?
Good. I got some of that, I'm afraid, but I didn't get the nub of it.
Okay, maybe, I don't know, maybe I should connect my mic.
But imperfectly, perhaps because of my increasing deafness.
So do you want to repeat that, Doris, and we'll see if the connection's maybe better? Yes. Try again, Doris.
What about putting your question in the chat, Doris?
Are you hearing me better now?
Yes.
Yeah, because I'm putting on the microphone now. Okay. Sorry, an earphone rather.
Not
so I was
really.
saying,
You're breaking.
So sorry, Doris, do you want to ask your question and then I'll relay it, because I've got good sound here and I can type it over to Duncan if necessary.
Okay, in the chat, as you pass it in the chat.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Good, thanks, Doris.
Yeah.
And I'll come back in a moment and answer your question. Is there anybody else wanting to speak on this item, Nicole?
Sorry,
Right,
Duncan,
I'm conscious that
sorry.
that's time that we. I'm conscious of the time and the fact that this is the time that we'd said that the meeting would finish, but there are interesting things to come up under any other business. I hope that people can stay with us while we consider these. Is that okay, Nicole?
Yes, that's fine. Okay, I think we might have lost Duncan again there. Let me just double check, everyone. Sorry about that. Yeah, he's just trying to reconnect there. I'm not sure if Charles Calder is in the session at the moment, but I believe he wanted to raise something under AOCB. So Charles, if you are here, you'd be very welcome to speak now. Okay, I also had a question for AOCB in the chat from Clive, and it might be best for Duncan to answer this. I'm not sure, Steve, but the question was, what do we know yet what the proposal is for Marshall going forward?
Nicole, I can answer that if you would like.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you. Yes, the interest from the business committee relating to Marshall East came about a year ago. The university actually still owns a lot of space down at that part of the city. It's got the Mitchell Hall, the picture gallery, the debater, the Department of Anatomy as was, and other space as well. It's quite a complex but quite a large space. And the business committee was thinking along the lines of being very interested in bringing back the university into the heart of the city, particularly in relation to perhaps graduation ceremonies or other ceremonies such as that. Now, at the same time that the business committee was interested, we learned that Carl Leidecker had set up a Marshall East working group within the university to look at Marshall East in terms of an art space, art and music, again to bring the university back into the middle of the city. And at the same time, the council is beginning to look at redevelopment of the Queen Street area. The principal is sitting on the council committee that was looking at redevelopment of Queen Street, and so it all seemed to be coming together where we could really look very hard at what it would be possible to be done. It has reached the point where the Marshall East Working Group have put in a paper which the business committee has seen, but we've not yet added to it, relating to the sort of art space that would be possible. And at that point, the COVID lockdown occurred and nothing more has been done. I understand that all the committees in the university are now paused, and that's the same with the council. So we're in the position that there is great interest to redevelop Marshall East, but it's all going to be in abeyance until we can get back into some sort of normality in terms of not only COVID, but of course the position of the university and the council. So I hope that's of some help.
Thanks very much, Jenny. I'm back in action, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. Sorry, we just had to, Jenny jumped in to answer a question about Marshall in your absence, but we're very pleased to have you back.
Yes, that's good. I've moved into the hall closer to the router, so that may work better.
Hopefully.
So where are we, Nicole?
Okay, so we're in any other business. So we've had the question about Marshall. I have called on Charles Calder to ask the question that he had submitted, but he doesn't seem to be in the session. Eric has offered to raise that text if you'd like, and it's up to yourself.
Good. That's good.
Okay, so Eric, if you would like to jump in, you're more than welcome.
Right then, so I have no involvement in this particular thing. It was just that Charles sent me a copy of his text. So given that he's not able to participate in this meeting, I'll just read what he wanted to draw to the General Council's attention. I beg to bring to the notice of the General Council a matter affecting the well-being and prosperity of the University. On 8th July 2020, an email addressed to Dear Colleagues was sent by the Principal and the President of the Aberdeen University Student Association. The message on the topic of action against racism begins, quote, "Like many other institutions, we have our own story to tell, and we will do so openly and honestly as we pledged in our statement in relation to Black Lives Matter. Part of that story is about our own historical connections to slavery, and we are investing in a new research post investigating those links. It will shine a light on how the university and the northeast of Scotland benefited from the proceeds of the slave trade. It will also explain the role of those connected to the university who were involved in slavery or actively sought its abolition. Examples of this legacy remain with us, such as some of our campus architecture or financial endowment funds. These too will be highlighted." End of quote. Charles's text then continues. Members of the General Council will recall that on 19th of June, nominations had closed for the 525 Alumni of Achievement. And then he quotes again, "Aberdeen alumni have built and continue to build a stronger Scotland and a better world. We want to tell the story," eloquent phrase, "of the University of Aberdeen's 525 years by highlighting the achievement of 525 of our most outstanding alumni from throughout our history." End of quote. He then continues, "How many of the 525 will emerge unscathed from the promised investigation? Contributing to a stronger Scotland and a better world would constitute no defence should a zealous investigator discover some troubling phrase, idiomatic expression, or figure of speech which offends modern sensibilities. In Hamlet's words, 'Be thou as chaste as ice, as pure as snow, thou shalt not escape calumny.' The corrective measures deemed necessary include reform of the curriculum." He then quotes from the document again, "The content of the medical curriculum is being reviewed to make it more inclusive," close quotes. "Re-education, equality and diversity training, an enhanced reporting system to enable students to lodge more easily and speedily allegations of microaggression. Buildings will be adorned by explanatory plaques. The promulgation of the document is self-evidently an event of consequence. The General Council is, in H.J. Butchert's superb phrase, the watchdog of the university. It guards the history and traditions of the College of St Mary of the Nativity and of Marshall College and University. It represents no special or sectional interest but the tota universitas. That is the reason I seek to bring this matter to the attention of the Council. Our watchdog, Semper Vigilans." Signed, Dr. Charles Calder.
Thanks very much, Eric, on Charles's behalf. Any thoughts on the question that Charles raises?
We don't have any raised hands or comments yet, Duncan.
Okay. I've had a little more leisure to look at Charles's comment than most of you have, and I wonder whether the General Council would be agreeable for me to drop a note to the principal, warning about unintended consequences of what seems to be a very sensible approach to Black Lives Matter, particularly with reference to the long history of Aberdeen University. Would that be agreeable? Does anyone have any thoughts on that possible way forward?
Mel Roberts has raised her hand, so Mel, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, taking my microphone. I was just wondering, actually, before we take any kind of action, it's quite hard, particularly over this kind of link, to really get the a thorough understanding of what Charles is saying. I'm not terribly sure I heard a question. I think I heard a statement. So it would be really useful, I think, perhaps for all attendees to be able to look at the content of the whatever in some leisure. At some leisure and actually understand exactly what he's really trying to get to. Would that be acceptable?
Thank you very much, Mel. How would we do that physically, Nicole, do you think?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I'd have to go in and have some discussions, I think, with Katrina and Rob about that. Right,
but the possibility of passing Charles's statement round, and because Mel's right, it is a statement rather than the question. Passing Charles's statement round and seeing what folk make of it would be a good way forward if feasible. Mark Lindley Highfield wants to add something. Mark?
Hello again. Just going to say that some of the comments of Charles resonate with me in an environment which at the moment is very sensitive to these issues, and the university's public stance of Black Lives Matter obviously needs to infiltrate and filter through all parts of the university. And while we've got a dedicated researcher attributed to the role of assessing these 1,000 individuals to be shortlisted to the 525, I would have thought it would be quite essential that as part of that investigation, the issue of any possible repercussions in terms of race are considered alongside it. And certainly if any of us were volunteering to be looking at batches of 25 nominations, we certainly would want to be considering the same thing, I think. So there seems to be a very serious and important point to be taken into account here. And I appreciate fully in terms of being guardians of the university, we're guardians of the legacy of our forebears and the graduates who come before us who have achievements well worthy of note. So quite how we handle that is probably through respectful consideration of the multiple facets of their lives, accounting for the good and the bad, which is how other people have dealt with such things. So I think it is important.
Grateful for that, and Rob was careful to say that to remind us that kind of aspect of the 525 will be taken into account. Steve Cannon wants to say something.
Well, even if you were able to give it due consideration, there are only 50 people in the room and at the meeting, so I don't think you can give it due consideration at the meeting. What you can do is you can include it in the minutes from the meeting that this was a matter that was raised under any other business, and you can record that concern, and then you, as chairman of the business committee, can choose to draw it to the attention, if you like, of the university if you so wished. And I think that's not an unreasonable position to take.
Wise counsel. Thanks, Steve. Any other? David Watts wants to contribute.
It was just a point of information, really, Duncan, that there are two issues here. There's one is the historic legacy, which I think was what's been talked about mostly. The issue to do with the medical school and the medical curriculum arose from an open letter from minority ethnic students concerning current teaching and behaviours within the medical school. So part of this we need to be careful that there are two separate issues here, one of which is a current curricular issue that we are rightly addressing, and the other is the legacy, if you like. So it's just to advise the council that there are those two issues side by side.
And I think that Charles was confining himself to the second of these two. Charles, in his capacity as the General Council's historian, it has to be said. Well, would people be happy to leave it in the way that Steve has suggested? That is, that the business committee considers the matter at its next meeting and decides how to respond appropriately. Is that agreeable?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I've got a couple of yeses. Mel?
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yes,
I think, yeah, I think the business committee is a very good vehicle through which to investigate or explore,
Yes.
the connotations of this. Yeah.
Okay, yes, we'll do that. And I thanks to Clive Kennedy for the suggestion that we put Charles's statement as an annex to the minutes. Any other points?
There is another point under any other business that was raised by Clive. He just asked, he said international students might be more likely to attend if they don't have to travel and therefore have lower accommodation costs, assuming they have internet. And do we need to help supply internet for them wherever they are?
So that's really a question appertaining to Steve's comments about COVID. Steve?
Yeah, I mean that's happening for existing students as I guess as well as prospective students, and part of the support that we've been giving all students, prospective and current, is to make sure that they've got the necessary equipment needed to make access. So that's part of the support we're giving. I'll draw it to the attention of the student recruiters, and I'll get an answer to you as to what's, if anything, specifics happening on that one. But the point is well made.
Thanks very much, Steve. Are there any other items of any other business, Nicole?
Not that. The only thing would be perhaps if Eric wants to raise about the student show.
The importance of this is that it's the 100th anniversary coming up. Is that right, Eric?
Yeah, the student show will be celebrating its centenary in 2021. So there have been some meetings of interested parties, people like myself, who are former script editors of Student Show, plus the current production team. So I can reveal that at this early stage that the Student Show this year was, of course, cancelled due to the pandemic. It's a production called Friesen, and it is intended that it will be the student show next year, which, if everything goes according to plan, hopefully theatres might be open, and so it would be held in April next year. That's the hope anyway at the moment. But because it's the centenary year next year, and there is an extensive archive of material held in special collections at this Sir Duncan Rice Library at Aberdeen University, the hope is that it will be possible to create a review show recreating some numbers from Student Show over the ages, if I can put it like that, which would be performed on a separate venue on a separate date, probably later next year. And that's where we are at the moment with the planning. But there is quite a lot of material. There's a lot of script material. There's a lot of lyrics. Sadly, there is less music because for some reason student show administrators in the past seem to have been rather lax at gathering the actual written down music. But there are ways around that, and so there may be some ways of recreating musical numbers from years gone by. But I should stress that the intention at the moment is this should be a show that's worth going to see, not just some sort of historic flummery or anything like that. It would be a living, breathing recreation of the spirit of show, if I may say that.
Right, you heard it here first, and there's a good advert for the future. Thanks very much, Eric. Now, I'm conscious that we're 20 minutes longer than people might have been led to expect. I think that reflects the interest that people have had in the varied items on the agenda, from the gloom of COVID to the joy of the student show. I would just like to end by saying a couple of things before Nicole talks about the next meeting. First, to reiterate how excellent it's been to have so many people contributing who aren't the usual suspects, who aren't in Aberdeen, who, like me, live firth of Aberdeen. And I would strongly encourage you to put yourselves forward for election to the Business Committee. The Business Committee is an excellent and vibrant body. You've heard some of us speaking today, and it would be more excellent and more vibrant if you join us. Secondly, to say through Steve particularly how much the General Council feels for the university and how supportive we feel for the university in these dark days, and to wish the university all the best for the new session in whatever form it takes. Now, I think people would be generally agreeable to do that. Thank you. And the last word, I think, like the first word, lies with Nicole about the next meeting.
Oh, thank you very much, Duncan, for that. Yeah, it's just to say the next statutory meeting is due to take place at the end of January. It's usually, the last couple of years, it's been on a Saturday, and it's been tied in with the university's annual meeting. Of course, we don't know what the world's going to look like come January, and we can't really say what the plans for that are going to be, but however we hold it, the plan will be to have a statutory meeting at the end of January 2021. So we will keep you posted about the details for that meeting when they're available.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Nicole, for organising this, and apologies for the heart attack that I gave you because my internet connection was going in and out. And thanks also to Chloe, who's been working the background, pedaling very hard to keep the computer working. And many thanks again to all participants. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thanks.